Resourceful Designer, episode 227, First Contact, Interviewing New Design Clients.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He likes his steaks cooked medium well, Mark Descote.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm happy you've decided to listen this week. In this episode, I'm going to talk about first contact. And no, I'm not talking about that Starfleet protocol. I'm talking about the very first time you meet a potential client and what you should be asking them. But before I get to that, I'm going to share a little bit of what I've been up to. It's been a really trying week for me. I've been having a lot of issues with my internet. In fact, I had a trusty paperclip sitting on top of my modem because several times a day it was crapping out on me and I had to press the little reset button, stick the paperclip in the back and reset it. And enough's enough. I got fed up and I decided to switch internet providers. They had already sent me, that was my fifth modem that they said would fix a problem I'm having. I've had 3 guys come to the house or 3 service people come to the house to look at it. Not to mention how many, I don't even know how many phone calls I had with their tech support. And after all of that, I said enough's enough and I decided to change companies. So far, knock on wood, the new internet has been working flawlessly. But that was a big thing. Earlier this week, I had a lot of downtime. I was being kicked off Zoom calls. I was having trouble updating websites. And it was just a real big pain. But I'm glad that part's over with. Now, I did mention last week how my presentation at PodFest Global Summit turned into a few different consulting calls, which was something I'd never even offered before until people started asking for it. Well, 2 of those consulting calls, at least, have already turned into new website clients. And it's kind of funny because the reason they wanted consulting calls is because they didn't need a website from me. They wanted me to review their current website. But after talking to me and hearing me discuss and go over their website and all the things that I thought they can improve, and I went into this consulting call with the idea that I was going to give them advice for them to improve their own website. But 2 of these people, at least, have already contacted me and says, we'd like you to build a brand new website. We really liked what you had to say. So I got 2 new web clients out of that one. So that was a good boost to my week. Now, on a downside, my allergies kicked in big time this week. So I do apologize if I sound a little more nasal than normal, but it's hay fever, ragweed is starting, and I've got the sniffles, my palate is itchy, my eyes are starting to burn. And all I could think is, wow, this is great in the age of COVID. Anywhere I go, if I start sneezing or sniffling, nobody's going to want to be around me. So that's just something I'll be dealing with for the next few weeks, I imagine. Now, something I do enjoy dealing with is the Resourceful Designer community. What a great bunch of people we have in there. They're not just random designers. They've become friends, they're peers, but not just that. Now they've become collaborators. Everybody in the community, I don't think any of them knew each other before they joined the community. But their time spent interacting with each other has formed a kind of bond among them. Members are now teaming up together to work on projects. Jobs and clients are being shared amongst each other now. And the community is really coming together anytime somebody in the group needs help with anything. This isn't like a Facebook group when you put out a post saying, I need help with this, and dozens of people that you have no idea who they are, what their skills are like, if they're even qualified, reach out and say, I can help you, let me DM you. No, within the community, this is designers knowing that they need help with something and not just saying, I need help, but knowing the skills and talents of the other people in the community and reaching out to specific members and saying, hey, can you help me? I know you're capable of doing this. Are you able to help me with this project? So it's great to know all these other designers who are qualified at different things that you can reach out to. And as I said in previous episodes, unlike a Facebook group or something like that, Resourceful Designer community is a safe place to have a real conversation about your business, about your career, about your clients with people that are on a similar journey to you. People that have been there, people that are going through the same stuff you are, people that understand what you're saying. And all of this without the BS and the drama that you would normally find in most online communities. I know I keep week after week praising this group. If I could take one thing away from all Resourceful Designer, the podcast, the website, the Facebook group, the community is probably the best thing to come out of this whole experiment of mine. And I just love all the people in it. Now, if you would like to be a part of this community and invest in your future, in your business's future, then why not head over to resourcefuldesigner.com/community and join. Now, before I get any further, I want to mention that this episode of Resourceful Designer is supported by the new season of Wireframe by Adobe, a podcast all about UX and how technology is helping to improve our lives. Now, I did mention it last week, and I hope that you did go check it out if you don't already follow. It's funny how many people reached out to me afterward and said, "Oh, I love that podcast. Wow, I already listened," or they're in season 3 right now. So people have already listened to season 1 and 2, and now they're in season 3. But if you haven't checked them out, I highly encourage you do. Especially now, the way that the pandemic and COVID has really changed our lives, the habits, the things we do. UI and UX really become important these days, more so than ever. And the host of the podcast, Khoi Vinh, he's the senior director of design at Adobe. And he takes this very seriously. He's going to dive deep in and talk to people who are in this industry. People from companies like Kickstarter and Patreon and Headspace and so many more. And he's going to talk to them and discuss things like how UI and UX design contributes to the success of, say, crowdfunding campaigns on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or how streaming platforms can be improved through UX and UI. So it really is an interesting podcast. I was lucky. They had given me previews of the first few episodes. They've gone beyond that now. They've got the season 3 has started. When they originally reached out to me was prior to the start. So they had given me early access, and I just love the episodes that I listened to. And now I'm subscribed and can't wait for more to come out. So it doesn't matter if you are a UX or UI designer. I know I don't consider myself one. But if you are somebody who loves design and you're listening to this podcast, so I know you do, and if you're curious on how design can impact someone's life, then there's something in this show for you. To find Wireframe, all you have to do is search in your favorite podcast app, or I made a very easy link for you. If you visit resourcefuldesigner.com/wireframe, that'll take you directly to the show's website where you have the convenient buttons that allow you to click and subscribe. And if you don't remember that, just remember that this is episode 227 of Resourceful Designer. And if you check in the show notes for this episode, you'll find the link there. So I do hope you check out Wireframe's new 3rd season and let me know what you thought. So once again, thank you very much, Wireframe, for supporting Resourceful Designer. And now, first contact, interviewing new design clients. How do you know that you're the right designer for a project? Or maybe the right question should be, how do you know that a design client is the right person for you to work with? I've covered what to ask during discovery sessions before. That was episode 120 of the podcast, as well as 50 questions to ask every new design client. And that was way back in episode 15 of the podcast. I've even shared 4 vital questions to ask your design client about their projects, and that was episode 189. In all of those episodes, plus on many other occasions on the podcast, I've talked about building relationships and asking questions. Now, all of that is to get to know your client better and to get to know their motivation and their reasoning behind whatever project it is that they're trying to hire you for. But all of those questions, all of that time spent is mostly after you've already decided that you're going to work with this client. Now, that, of course, that's regardless of whether or not they've decided they're going to work with you, but you've made the decision that, yes, I want to pursue this. Or at least you've heard enough to be intrigued about what it is they're bringing you. But I don't think I've ever talked about that first contact with a potential new client. And if I have, please forgive me. This is episode 227 after all. You can't expect me to remember every single thing I've said on this show over the past 5 years. But even if I did cover this topic before, it's worth covering again. First contact. I'm talking about those times when the phone rings with an unfamiliar number, those emails you receive from unknown people, or just the conversations that spring up out of nowhere when you meet somebody in person and they find out that you're a designer. During those initial first few minutes of contact, how do you determine if this person, this potential new client, is someone worth investing your time and energy into in order to find out more about why they contacted you? Because trust me, as a designer, you will hear from people who you don't want anything to do with. So what do? Well, you conduct a quick impromptu interview. Let's call it that. I mean, you don't call it an interview to the person, but you're going to want to ask some questions right off the bat to find out, before you deep dive into their project, you want to find out about this person, their motivation, and whether you want to work with them. So I'm going to share with you some questions that I like to ask before getting too deep into a conversation. And whenever I ask these, if I'm not satisfied with the answer, I can politely end things before I waste too much of my valuable time, because my time is valuable. If I'm spending it on the phone talking to a client, that means I'm not spending it working on client work that I already have. So I want to get in and out as fast as possible, especially if it's somebody I decide I don't want to work with. Now, obviously, the first question I'm going to ask after the introductions are done is, what can I help you with? Now, this seems so basic, but why not cut to the chase? Ask them what it is they need your help with. Now, you may know from experience that there are many, many people out there that don't know what a graphic designer or a web designer does. So I ask this question to find out right at the start what it is they need help with. Because it's funny, but I've had people contact me to redesign the interior of their restaurant. Not design-wise. They wanted me to redesign the interior of the restaurant. Tables, the way the bar is, everything. I don't offer that service. I've had people contact me to draw up blueprints or plans for some sort of invention they had and they need something to patent. Well, that's a service I don't offer. I've had people contact me to create software and apps for them. Now, yes, I can design the graphics for software and apps, and I've done that before, but I can't write the software or build the apps the way they want them. They have to hire somebody else for that. I've had people ask me to design trade show floor plans. And I'm not talking about just the map of the floor plan. I've done those before. On many occasions, I've done the trade show floor map for them to show people. But they actually wanted me to take an empty room and design, quote unquote, design the best layout to accommodate the most exhibitors in the most optimized way. Well, no, that's not in my job description. I've had people mistakenly think that as a graphic designer, I should be well-versed in CAD, computer-aided design, in order to create their, engineering drawings or something like that. And no, most designers don't know CAD. But again, people don't know what graphic designers and web designers do. So what I'm getting at is, you need to ask these people, as soon as you pick up the phone, what it is you can help them with, so that if they are mistaken about your skills and what you can offer, you can end the call right there and get back to work. Now, if you get past that, if you realize that this person does know what a graphic designer is and what they can do, then I usually ask, how do you expect me to help? Or something along those lines. I mean, I don't necessarily use this exact question, but something along the lines of, how can I help? So if the project that they're discussing is within my wheelhouse, it's a web design or print design or something that I can do, then the next step is to find out, what do they expect of me as the designer? Depending on your services or the stage of career that you're at, your response may differ from mine. But I immediately turn down any job where the client expects me to design the idea that they have in their head. If the conversation starts something like, I know exactly what I want, but I need somebody with your skills to do it for me, or to design it or to draw it up for me, then the chances are pretty good that I won't end up working with this client. I've done my fair share of instruction following in the past, especially when I worked at the print shop. Well, I went into business for myself so I can work with clients, not for clients. And if all they want me to do is execute their ideas and not use any of my skills as a problem solver or my creativity as a designer, then I'll politely pass on the job. Now, I understand that you may not be in that position in order to turn down work. And if that's the case, I suggest you try to turn that conversation towards how you can offer more to the client than simply being an instruction follower. And I've done that successfully on many occasions when somebody came to me and said, I've got an idea and I want you to implement it. Well, through the discussion, I've turned that into why don't we sit down and talk about it and I'll figure out the best way that I can help you. And sometimes that's all it takes is a little education on what a designer can do for them. And all of a sudden they realize, wow, this person could do a lot more than I expected when I phoned them. Now, question number 3 I ask is there a deadline for this project? I've said it many times before. In order to grow and prosper in this design business, in this field that we've chosen, you need to form relationships with your clients. It's the core of any business, especially one that's client-driven. You need to create relationships. And you really can't do that with a brand new client if there's a tight deadline for a project. Existing clients, okay, because that relationship is already there. It's starting to form. But the first time I work with a client, I want to be able to take the time to get to know them. I want to get to know their business. I want to get to know how they work, and I want to know how best I can use my skills and my services to help them. Now, of course, the deadlines are kind of subjective. If a client contacts me for a website and says, oh yeah, we do have a deadline, it's 2 months from now, then of course, yeah, okay, I'll keep listening. I mean, I could do a website in 2 months. However, if they come to me and say, we have a website and we need the site launched by next Wednesday, and they're not just talking about a landing page, they mean the entire site, I'll gladly pass on that project, regardless of how simple it sounds. And I know that I could put a website together in just a day or two if need be. But I'll still pass because if they're that rushed and under pressure to get it done, all of that stress and anxiety that they're feeling, I know it'll be passed on to me. And I really don't need that. So again, you need to determine if whatever deadline they say is a constraint to you, or if you're comfortable working within that parameter. But if the deadline seems a little excessive, a little too tight, just pass on the job. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, the next question I ask is, what's your position regarding this project? And what I mean by this is, who are they in the pecking order, in the chain? To be blunt, I want to know if the person that I'm talking to on the phone or via email is the person in charge of the project or not. I make sure to ask this question because too many times in the past have I been approached about a project and was very eager and everything sounded great and agreed to work with them, only to later find out that the person that I was talking to that I thought I was going to work with, that I thought was hiring me, turned out to be some sort of middleman or assistant or a secretary. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I've many, many times worked with assistants and secretaries and that on projects, and they turn out great. But what I don't like is to find out after the fact that the person that I thought was hiring me or that I was going to be dealing with is now out of the picture, and I'm left dealing with somebody that I haven't vetted. Because maybe I really like the personality of the secretary or the assistant or whoever that was the one contacting me. We bonded, we meshed, we started that relationship. And all of a sudden now I'm left dealing with somebody else, and this person I just don't get along with. I don't need those headaches. So if I'm going to be working with the owner or the CEO or the chairman or whoever, but they're not the ones contacting me, I want to know who that person is, and I want to meet or at least talk to that person before I agree to anything. I refuse to work with anybody that I haven't actually had a chance to talk with. And that's happened on more than one occasion. And that's why now I always make sure to ask this question, because it's surprising how many people don't let you know that. They're there to find a designer and they're going to explain everything to you as if they're the ones, but they're not. So I always make sure to ask that question, if they're the person or what's their responsibility. Are they going to be involved? Are they going to be my contact person? And so forth. Now, the next question I ask is, what budget did you have in mind? And I know. Budget is really not a topic that you like bringing up. But wouldn't you rather get this conversation over with now instead of later during a discovery meeting or a pitch meeting or after several conversations and investing your valuable time in the project only to discover that the price wasn't what you expected? I personally want to know right at the start if this person can afford me. If they say, yeah, I need a website and my budget's $500, or I'm looking for a logo and I have $150 to spend, I can usually end the conversation right there and say, thank you very much, but I'm not the designer for you. I wish them well, all the best, and then I get back to whatever it was I was doing before I answered the phone or saw the email or whatever. Now, yes, of course, I'm being a little bit harsh here. And no, I don't just brush them off if their dollar signs are too low. But oftentimes, after explaining why their budget just doesn't fit my skills and my prices, we end up parting ways anyways. I mean, if somebody can't afford me, they can't afford me. That's just the way it is. No hard feelings. I wish you the best. I'm sure there's somebody out there that can do it for your price. But that person's not me. But yes, on some occasions, the person, when I start talking about why I charge more and what I can offer, they're convinced and they realize that, yeah, maybe the budget they had in mind was too low. They really had no idea going into this thing how much something would cost. And they realize that it's not just an expense, it's an investment. And when you can convince a client of that, all of a sudden they're thinking, yeah, maybe I can afford a little bit more because I'm now investing in my company. This isn't just a business expense. And if I can get them thinking along those lines, then I'll gladly continue that conversation. Because I can tell you more than once, someone that started off mentioning a very low budget ended up hiring me for multiple times the price they originally quoted me. So it's not unheard of. But yes, more often than not, they just don't have the money. And that's okay. I wish them the best. The final question I'm going to share with you here, and of course there's more questions you can ask, but the final one I'm going to share is, are they able to pay the deposit upfront? Yeah, this last question's about payment. We've already talked about budget. We've talked a little bit about the project and who they are in relation to the project and everything. And I'm starting to get to the point where it's like, yeah, okay, I haven't found any reason to brush them off yet. So the next question will be about whether or not they can pay a deposit. Now, depending on the project, I usually insist on at least 50% deposit upfront. On some projects, I want full payment upfront. That's just the way I work. And I do not start on any work until I have the money I ask for in hand. And I'm pretty strict about this. If somebody tells me, yeah, okay, no problem, the check's in the mail, or it's going through our accounting department right now, you should be paid in a couple of days, well, that's not good enough. I'll wait those couple of days to make sure that I have the money, and at that point, I'll start on whatever their project is. Now, of course, some clients will try to make excuses about the deposit, saying why they can't pay it right now or whatever. Well, I can only imagine how the rest of the project is going to go with them if they can't even get that part sorted out. I've had excuses from, yeah, well, we've got the funding. We're just waiting for the venture capitalists to come through. Well, if the venture capitalists haven't given you the money yet, then no, you are not funded yet. When you have the money in hand, that's when you're funded, and that's when you can hire me. You're not hiring me now on the promise that they said they were going to fund you. So if for some reason they cannot pay the deposit that I'm asking for, then it's best just to turn down the project, because chances are you're going to run into more problems in the future. Now, of course, there are some exceptions to this rule. For example, I recently did a small project for one of Canada's top telecommunication companies. And in their case, there was a lot of paperwork involved, and we were going back and forth with their accounting department because they needed to get me on board as a vendor before they can actually issue payment. And I figured, hey, I'm dealing with $1 billion company here. I think they're good for the couple of $100s they're going to owe me. So that one there, I didn't necessarily wait for the payment. So you have to judge it on your own. But in most cases with smaller clients, I insist on having the money in hand before I start any work. Now, of course, there are many, many other questions that you should be asking clients when you initially contact them, or they contact you, I should say. The whole point of this is you are trying to vet them as quickly as possible in order to determine if it's worth spending any more of your valuable time discussing the project with them. And sometimes it's not. And it's best to just end that call as quickly as possible and get back to whatever you were doing. Now, in some cases, when you're going through these questions, you realize, yes, this is somebody I want to work with. Let's talk more. Let's discuss things and take it on to the next level. But at other times, you're going to realize as you get 1, 2, 3 questions in that really, I don't need to ask anything else. And it's best to just part ways, no hard feelings. Your time is valuable and you don't need to waste it talking to people who you will never end up working with. Because if you do decide to take on these projects, even though they didn't quote unquote pass your question test, you can possibly have some big, big headaches in the future. and a lot of other problems down the road. So ask your questions, trust your gut, and quickly determine if the conversation is worth prolonging. So that's a little look at how I handle first contact with a client. What's your strategy? I'd love to know it. Why don't you share it by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 227 and let me know in the comments. Now, before I go, I just want to once again thank Wireframe from Adobe for supporting Resourceful Designer. And if you're curious about the podcast, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/wireframe. That'll redirect you to their website where you can click on a link there in order to subscribe or listen and just check out the show. It's a really good show that talks about how design betters our lives. I think you'd really enjoy it. And the other thing I think you'd enjoy is the Resourceful Designer community. I talked a lot about it at the beginning, so I'm not going to go into too much now, but if you've been on the fence and you've been wondering about it, I really suggest you check it out, give it a try, see if it is what you need it to be. But be warned, once you do make it in, the other members there are going to be so welcoming, you're not going to want to leave. To learn more about the community, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, especially if you're still listening at this point. I really do appreciate you. But that's it for me. So until next time, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business. And as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.